Maseko, good morning. And I suppose, it may be 10 more beds taken from 30 to 40 at Helen Joseph might ease the situation a little there. But it certainly highlights further just where we are failing when it comes to treating mental illness in the country and where we're falling short.
That's correct, Yuveka. I mean, it is quite an improvement, a little bit of an improvement when you look at Gauteng, looking at the fact that we've had that mental health care disaster, Life Esidimeni, and it actually highlighted how much services we actually don't offer to the mentally ill, and it said that South Africa actually doesn't care. But if we get into it, if you look at the budget that the health department gets from National Treasury, it's a 222.6 billion rand, Yuveka. But of that budget, and remember, health actually gets, it's one of the top three that gets most of the money every year. And of that 222.6 billion rand, according to the World Health Organization, we only actually invest 3% of that budget for mental health. So in layman's terms, it basically means that you and I get 100 rand each per year for mental health care services. Now, if we look at, for instance, how many people actually rely on public health care services, only 26% of us, as of March last year, are using medical aid. So only 26% of us, only just above a quarter of the population, is able to afford private health care. And this is obviously very important in mental health because it's very specialized and the psychologists are very expensive. Now, 74% of the population doesn't use medical aid, so they need the state facilities. Now, if you look at the services that we offer, according to the World Health Organization, after profiling South Africa, in 2011 we had 1.58 psychosocial care providers per 100,000 patients, and the recommendation is for us to have over 2,900 per 100,000, and we are under 2 per 100,000 people. Now, the norms is that we're supposed to have 40 beds at all of our state facilities that offer mental health care services per 100,000 patients. But, Yuveka, this is our reality. Our reality, Yuveka, is that we only have 2 beds per 100,000 patients. We're supposed to have 40, so we are 38 short. We are also supposed to have, remember I said over 2,900 psychologists per 100,000 patients. We only have about 320 to 350 psychologists nationwide. We're supposed to have over 2,900 per 100,000 patients. Now, if you look at the fact that, we're a nation that apparently actually goes through a lot of mental illnesses, a lot of mental disorders because of our socioeconomic standings, only 0.08. So under 1 per 100,000 patients with children, and under 2, like I said, per 100,000 patients with adults. Now, if we move on, lastly, Yuveka, if we move on and we look at exactly how many people are suffering from mental illness, 30.3% of us will go through a mental illness or a mental disorder in our lifetime. That means this is over, if we're about 56 million South Africans, over a quarter of us will go through a mental illness, and you're given only 100 rand annually to be able to see a mental illness doctor if you're using the state. Now, if you look at, for example, 43% of the people living with HIV/AIDS going through mental illnesses or episodes of mental illness to a point where they need to use acute facilities, 43% of 8 million South Africans will go through a mental illness, and you're only given 100 rand per year to actually be able to get those mental health care services. So those 10 beds drop in the ocean.
Well, it's not just a shortcoming, it's an actual disaster is what we're facing. When
and we've sort of known that as a country, we are not doing enough in terms of mental health, and then the stats are really revealing.
And I mean, I had no clue.
I mean, 30% of us will have suffered from some form of mental illness. That's about 80 million people, for just over, but nearly 20 million people. Because we're about 56 million people, and third of us.
Exactly, and what I found out, Bradan, is that even though you have medical aid, you're still not safe, because if you go through an acute mental illness and you need to be institutionalized, you cannot be helped, because the private sector will tell you they just don't have the money to be able to have you stay in an institution for 30 days, a year, sometimes the rest of your life. So you're going to have to go back to the States, which invests 100 Rand per year for you.
And the other shocking stat for me is we got 1.5, you said we have in terms of caregivers in that space.
Yes.
But we need more than 2,900 according to the World Health Organization.
Per
so
100,000.
we are way below what is required.
Exactly.
And we're a growing population.
What's been the reaction, or what is the response from the health department to stats like this?
Well, the health department, obviously, after that Life Esidimeni tragedy, particularly in Gauteng, is trying. That's why they had, these 10 beds added to Helen Joseph. It used to be 30, now it's 10. This is the same psychiatric ward, Uveka, that the DA in Gauteng was complaining has not opened and it's taking too long. It took 3 years to actually have it running finally, and it's not fully functional yet. There's still another part of it that is still being built. So they are trying. And actually, according to the World Health Organization, the statistics did go up. But that's only very slight. It's a slight increase. And most of the time, actually, Uveka, the pressure is on Gauteng, because a lot of people trust this province to be able to provide the care. And then there's a lot of pressure. Now, when I spoke to the health department, they also are saying that, for instance, in the justice system, there is more pressure on them if, for instance, you're a lawyer and your client is up for a crime such as murder, and you want your client to go for mental observation, and you actually waste the state's money, the state's time, because you're trying to buy time for your client. That also then adds the pressure, because, like I said, we only have 40 beds per 100,000 patients, or rather we have less than 2, when we need 40 per 100,000 patients. So the pressure just keeps piling, and we're just not investing enough yet.
Masiko Rahlaga, thank you very much. A gloomy picture indeed for the state of South Africa's mental health care facilities and services. 3% of that huge budget of more than 200 odd billion rand going there, not enough.